Hello, everybody. Welcome to Think of Me When You're Meditating. This is my first time doing this talk in Boulder proper. It's actually my first time doing it in a strip club. I mean, outside of a strip club. Good, I ruined my first joke. Okay. I'm delighted to be surrounded here by my friend Jonathan Mason's beautiful, iconic artwork of places in Boulder. And I'm delighted that you are here too, to the extent that you are. Buddhism is a religion of the self, about the illusion of self-awareness, self-liberation. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about the self, specifically myself. And if I'm smart, and if there's still time, I'm going to talk about yourself too. George Bernard Shaw, the English playwright, said, "The man who writes honestly about himself and the times he lives in writes about all people and all times." And for your sake, I hope there's more than a grain of truth to that. I'm a stand-up Buddhist, and I wanted to write the script tonight from a place of real inner peace, from a felt feeling that everything is really all right, so that message would radiate out to each and every one of you. But I didn't. That's in my other show. The message of this show is, and I'm just as passionate about it, is that the human condition is complex and full of ambiguity. And we can't boil it down to a couple slogans on Instagram. And we must continually rise to the occasion of this complexity by continuing to engage in our collective inquiry into who we are with an open mind. And humor is an important tool in that process. Humor helps us open our minds. As I say in my book, when we said humor can lead to enlightenment, we were not joking. We're still at the beginning of our inquiry into who we are and what we are, friends, not at the end. I mean, think about it. We're still trying to figure out where to park in downtown Boulder. We're still figuring out the best way to get out of Flatirons Mall. Yeah. You know who you are. Tonight, I'll be reading some selections from my book, telling some stories, and hopefully getting some reactions out of you. Every joke is going to land differently for each person, and I want to hear what gets stimulated for you. None of us is as smart as all of us. And I'm a big fan of what is called the group mind, even though it usually turns against me. As I say in the introduction to my book, this is a very sensitive microphone. As I say in the introduction to my book, hi Julian. I hope these jokes, known as the Eisenberg Principles, will shed light on the contradictions of the human psyche and stir our collective conversation forward. I find many of the accepted linguistic devices and popular idioms that we use to speak about mind, meaning, and the human story unsatisfyingly simplistic. We need to keep digging, friends. We need to continue breaking the conceptual rocks, excavating the emotional terrain, and polishing the rough semantics we rely on to describe and relate to the human condition. Now, I believed until about a week ago that my material speaks for itself. That if you got my book and you read it, you would know what themes I'm trying to suggest about language and evolution and consciousness and time. But in a very dark alley out in Gun Barrel, about a week ago, about 2 in the morning, these two guys, both wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt from the Elephant Journal, cornered me. They said, "We're interested in the subject of Buddhist emptiness." I said, "Here, take my wallet." They said, no, not that kind of emptiness. We want to understand your book. We know it's more than just a collection of paradoxical jokes. We know there are underlying themes and messages, but we need you or somebody to connect the dots for us. Connect the dots, I said. How about if I buy you a coloring book with pictures of Ganesh and Randy Rainbow? Okay, so I explained it to them as best I could, and we were there till the sun came up, and nobody got hurt. And they just texted me about an hour ago saying, wow, now reading your book is a whole new experience. They said, oh, now we smell what you're stepping in. Talking about my book is hard. Not because I stole most of the material from Mark Twain and Yogi Berra, and Seinfeld. But one of the main points throughout my book is that, well, most statements of any kind are actually pretty tenuous. My jokes show that almost anything you can try to say, or any point you can try to make, presents an incomplete or distorted or limited view of the world, which moreover can be undermined or contradicted in the very saying of it with just a little sleight of hand. Life is too nuanced. Language is still too clumsy. Well, I'm going to read some from the book. I'll start with chapter 1, take my advice and think for yourself.
Can I think about that?
Yes. Thinking is allowed. Take my advice and think to yourself. There's going to be a little bit of what they call bibliomancy involved, in that I haven't selected which jokes I'm going to read, only because I didn't have time. So, but hey, that's the way things go. So I'll try to give you a good tour. So I quote Werner Heisenberg, not only is the universe stranger than we think, it's stranger than we can think. I quote Bertrand Russell, mathematics is the subject in which we never know if what we are saying is true. And then I quote myself, I can verify, and this is my first joke in the book, I can verify with 100% certainty that I don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Oh, let's see. We were practicing Zen when the identity theft happened, which is why they didn't really get much. Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do, a thought I often ponder on my way to the bathroom. Barry, there's a seat up here. Is that seat free?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, this is my friend Barry.
How you doing, Greg?
Barry, I presume. I like to learn from all people, but especially those who agree with me. I like some of you guys. I do believe in a completely parallel universe. I just don't think we're going to run into it anytime soon. We got other problems. I always follow my instincts, except when I get a funny feeling maybe I shouldn't. Less really is more, so the more less you can get, the better. Focusing on quality over quantity does eventually work if you do it enough times. Stick with me. The principles of polarity are not that great, but they don't suck either. I'm gonna let that one settle in. Principles of polarity are not that great, but they don't suck either. Anyway, I like to watch people flip through my book and see which of the material they respond to. And I loved it that one person was reading it and reading, she got to that joke, and that was the one that really got her. It's like, great, you never know. My name is Gregg Eisenberg, and I grew up in a Jewish home in Chicagoland. My parents spoke Yiddish when they didn't want us to understand what they were saying. And I got revenge by listening to Light My Fire by the Doors on my stereo at full volume and throwing firecrackers out the bedroom window. I also started writing poetry that they couldn't understand, so we had a mutual misunderstanding. I've lived in the Boulder area for a couple decades now. I got my bachelor's degree in California in abnormal psychology, and I got my master's in Boston in mental illness. I used to be very heavy into Tibetan Buddhism, but lately I've become even more fascinated with Mongolian barbecue. I take a Buddhist Judeo approach to wisdom. From the Buddhist tradition, I take that life is suffering, and the way to liberate yourself from suffering is by following the Buddha's noble eightfold path. From the Jewish tradition, I also take that life is suffering, and there's nothing you can do about it. I consider myself more of a stand-up philosopher than a stand-up comedian. I try to use humor perhaps a little like the old Zen masters to interrupt our habitual thought processes, to upend or deliberately tip over points of conventional wisdom. Some people like to tip over cows. I like to tip over ideas. I want to make you laugh and have fun on the surface while I'm slyly clearing the palette of your mind of old residue and paving the way for new insight. In that regard, I'm inspired by the words of the great transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau, or Hank, as his friends called him. Be a Columbus, he wrote, to whole new continents and worlds within you, opening new channels, not of trade, but of thought. Many writers and innovators see this excavation as their life work. When asked why he wrote novels, the Czech author Franz Kafka made this comment: "A book should serve to act like an ice axe to break the frozen sea within us." Well, I'm sensing he struggled a little with winter depression. It's like, it's okay, like it doesn't have to be like an ice axe, but we know what you mean, I don't want to hurt anybody. I do accept his basic premise. If a writer is going to undertake a philosophical inquiry and write about it, they have no choice but to go wherever the material leads them and break open new conceptual, emotional, and aesthetic grounds at all costs. That's what Norman Mailer meant when he said, "Whenever I sit down to write, whatever I write has to be more honest and cut to the core even more than whatever I wrote last time." Each joke is going to land differently on each person. Each laugherism is going to invoke a different set of thought explosions, I hope, or some personal references, or even random associations. Each one is like a Rorschach test. My friend Timothy Ash said the material in my book makes him realize where he's at. This is what he wrote in his review. He said, "These jokes function like crazy wisdom koans that don't just make me laugh, but show me where I need to grow. The profusion of insightful, paradoxical one-liners become a mirror of my own psyche. The particular jokes that bust my gut or blow my mind are almost always ones that point to issues in my life that I'm either dealing with or need to deal with." So please sit back, roll with the punches, let them land the way they land. Don't worry about it. Everything is really, really okay. Or is it? So I'm going to read some from chapter 3. Even the earth is bipolar. I'm finally transcending my need to be constantly rising to new levels. The pursuit of fame is said to be pure vanity by some of the most prestigious members of our society. I'm an old soul, but I'm also a late riser, so it all evens out. you, of all people, have to stop taking things so personally. I hate the stupid, petty power struggles in which I don't have the upper hand. I feel so sorry for you that everyone thinks of you as a victim. Ooh, these are some of my favorites. They're all my favorites. Life may be terribly hard and very lonely, but at least we're all living longer these days. Most problems are completely imaginary, and for some people, this is a very real issue. I want to make my big difference in the world by showing people that things never really change. Come see me after the show. Or what was that? Like, yeah, you want to subscribe to my blog to get weekly updates on how things aren't really changing. Dualism does work for me, but only about half the time. The truth that set me free cost me everything I have. Oh yeah, this one. By refusing to compete with you, I've already won. George Burns once said, "A comedian only makes you laugh, but a humorist makes you laugh and think." Tonight, folks, I'm trying to make you do all three. It's formulaic. Some of you know I only do comedy part-time. I actually make most of my money doing tragedy on the side. It's big business out here, big business. One of my heroes, Oscar Wilde, said, "There are really only two tragedies in life. One is not getting what you want. The other is getting it." And this segues well to another one of the themes that I think is running through my book. The questions surrounding happiness, fulfillment, enlightenment, peace of mind, liberation, or at least making progress towards those states, which is getting harder and harder to do with all the traffic in Boulder these days. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with what Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert wrote in his book, Stumbling on Happiness. His thesis is that we distort a lot of our memories when we try to remember how things felt in the past. And we likewise can't see the full picture when we try to imagine how things will make us feel in the future. His thesis is that we're basically pretty dumb about what actually does and does not make us feel happy. We would almost do better if we stopped trying so hard. And one of the jokes in my book riffs off this idea. My formulas for happiness stopped working, but who knows, maybe randomness will work better. I think happiness is hard to define. It's hard to measure. So much of the quality of our life experiences is set by the expectations we have. That's why I told you this is stand-up philosophy and not stand-up comedy. I think we expect to be very happy and feel there's something wrong if we aren't. The Dalai Lama even said the very purpose of life itself is happiness. But I think that's more of the tease than a useful observation. It's kind of a self-reflective tautology. You would be more content if you felt happier, and you would be happier if only you felt more content. I don't think anybody really knows the secret sauce, though many secret sauces are for sale. That's for sure in the self-improvement industry. Now, I am not going to deny we must keep evolving. Keep trying to move forward. Keep believing there's a way out of our obsessive-compulsive manias. We've got to keep moving forward. And wouldn't it be nice if we could move forward from a place of feeling we are enough, from a place of sufficiency, rather than from a place of lack or need? I play with these ideas a lot in the book. I'm going to read now from chapter 6, Feeling insufficient just isn't good enough. You gotta do better. This whole human experience is merely a long, lucid dream. And in it, you still owe me $200. I question everything people say, but only because that's what the last guy told me to do. People are very hungry for simplistic explanations, and that's all you really need to know. I'm just blindly going along with the plan for us to not act like a bunch of sheep. Reptile brain says, kill. Mammal brain says, see if empathy will work first. Neocortex says, record the conversation and establish a paper trail. Come on in, guys. Got to listen to that executive function. There's maybe some room along that wall over there, if you want to squeeze on in. I'm feeling fine, which is simply a rough average between devastated and ecstatic. Glad you like it. Hi. I started to party on Wednesday this week just to take some pressure off the weekend. God only knows if I'll use my free will this time. Oh, I just sent this one to somebody. Living in a radically paradoxical universe has been nothing but a complete blessing. Radio interviewer once asked Jerry Garcia, who was the guitar player for a famous band, what gets in the way of your creativity the most? His answer was staggering to me. He said, everything I think. And that really is part of what I'm playing with in this book. Nothing hinders our understanding of reality more than what we believe we already understand about it. Stephen Hawking is said to have said something very similar. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. That's what I'm stepping in. To learn to question what we already think we know without throwing away scientific evidence or indulging in fantasy is one of the challenges of our times. It's not unlike the philosophy of jazz expressed well by Miles Davis when he said, don't play what's there, play what's not there. So I want to play a little more of what's not there. Chapter 9, I'll read from, I'm going aggressively New Age. Let's see. My thoughts are thinking me more than I'm thinking them. But it doesn't matter, it's my wife who calls the shots. I really want that joke to work. I really want that one to work. Sorry? Jay, what do you have to say? Woo, couples therapy. Let's hear the next one. We're going to talk. Life is really... Oh, good. I'm going to do more marital jokes. Life is really a long test to see how well we can remember that no one is grading us. Greed is the one 7 deadly sin I just can't seem to get enough of. I fully expected to be disappointed, and you didn't let me down one bit. Ooh, yeah, the cynical people out there tonight. Please don't take my intolerance for people like you personally. Ooh, I know, we're exposing some vulnerable stuff here. Winning Winning friends by appealing to their vanity is no tactic for someone as fascinating as you. I told you I'd be talking about yourself too, as well as myself. Let's see. It's not my delusion of separation that keeps us apart. It's yours. These are jokes you really can't do east of 75th Street. I'm telling you, I've tried. Einstein waited many years for his wife to give him a divorce. And that's when he realized time itself can slow down. Consciousness has really come a long way since we took the Neanderthals' land and invented pasta. I don't know, where was I when I wrote that? Like, I have no idea, like, was I driving, like, going, oh yeah, like, I'm gonna write a joke about consciousness, like, okay. But I mean, that's what these all are, actually. Consciousness has really come a long way since we took the Neanderthals' land and invented pasta. Tuscany. Michelangelo said, you keep sculpting until there isn't anything more to take away. And I have nothing to add to that. Europeans think Americans are ill-informed, loud, and self-centered. But that's so unfair. We aren't that loud. Oh God, oh, I love this one. I'm grieving this week over how much time I've spent being preoccupied with loss. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm determined to be less goal-oriented within 3 months. The bibliomancy's working for me tonight. My friend Vic Shane once said, all humor is philosophy. I agree, a lot of it is, when it isn't just satire or slapstick. Think of what Oscar Wilde said along those lines. He said, if you want to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh as you're doing it. Otherwise, they'll kill you. They did kill him, by the way, precisely because he was making his humorous observations about English and Irish society. Friedrich Nietzsche said something similar about 50 years earlier. He said, it is the truth being stated in a bold new way. That is the essence of humor. And Ludwig Wittgenstein, the Austrian linguist, went even further and said, an entire treatise of philosophy could be written that consists entirely of jokes. But here's where I'm going with this. I recently read Freud's landmark book, Sigmund Freud, he's Austrian also, Jokes and the Unconscious. And in his inimitable way, he made some fascinating observations. In his view, jokes are a way at hinting at a truth through innuendo, at some set of facts or factors that are outside the scope of what is explicitly being stated in the joke itself. In other words, a joke is saying something without saying it. It's based on the power of inference. It's a subtle concept. Here's an example. Coming right at you. El Al Flight 441 is landing on December 23rd in Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, right on time. The pilot comes on the radio and says, welcome to Israel. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened, seats upright, and tray tables up until we're safely in the terminal. And to those of you who are still seated, Merry Christmas. The joke is funny, I think, because it is invoking something that's not explicitly stated. It is making your mind imagine the Jewish passengers, the Israelis, disobeying the orders of the pilot, just as it's directing your attention to the passengers who are remaining in their seats. Is this interesting? I think this is interesting because I write jokes. So the art of the joke is the art of invoking a set of facts or factors without explicitly naming them. But instead, by making the readers connect the dots and drawing their attention to something external to what is actually being pointed out. So I would add to that, bless you, Ted. I would add to that the real craft of it is to invoke a set of ideas economically in terms of number of words or amount of information. The more you are able to not say and still get your point across is what's funny. In Freud's view, we laugh because so much is being said without saying it. One of the jokes in my book is, how you see me is ultimately up to you. All I can do is try to manipulate the process. That keeps me busy. Keeps me real busy. Writers and artists and comedians are trying to manipulate your mind. Picasso said, art is a lie that makes you realize the truth. I'm trying to work in that tradition, in that lineage. Another one of the jokes in my book, I always think of Israelis with this one, is inner peace does not come naturally. You have to fight for it. Well, I'm going to read some selections from, let's see, which chapter? How about chapter 14, The Power of Later. I don't compare myself to others nearly as much as some people do. My identity crisis is clearly what my life is all about. We never show favoritism to any of our children. Our middle child just wouldn't stand for it. Very concerned about my mother. She hasn't worried about me in 2 weeks. Oh, if only things had gone wrong earlier, we wouldn't be in this predicament. We've got to make rejecting the status quo the new norm. Oh, I like this one. Oh. Succumbing to peer pressure is seriously frowned upon around here, Mr. There is absolutely no honor in trying to defend your dignity to others for anything more than 4 hours per day. As you get older, you get clearer about what's really transpiring around you. But aside from that, it's an enjoyable process. The Dalai Lama insists that your enemy is your greatest teacher, which is why I now carry mace at school. When I was young, I decided not to base my self-worth on my income level, which was a very costly mistake. I was thoroughly indoctrinated as a child to resist all forms of thought control. I want to go back to the good old days when I couldn't appreciate how good I had it. Let's see, I think I'm going to do a couple from the next chapter. Chop wood, carry water, charge phone. The rustic life. We're all stuck in the prisons of our minds, but at least we get 3 hot meals a day here. I've been outside the box for 4 days now, and I'm thinking pretty damn hard. I reached out and touched someone. What are you in for? Michael, you're here. I hear the laugh. When I see how little progress I've made in my Buddhist practice lately, I feel emptiness inside. I am so much more than just a guy sitting here stripping away his delusions of grandeur. I gotta be. I bought everything I need for the revolution at Walmart. And it was all on clearance. I used to live in the present moment and plan to get back there again soon. I now only have 3 minutes left to learn how to manage my time better. See, my friend Tim is right. You have to notice which ones you're laughing at and which ones are making you get provoked a little bit. The concept of diminishing returns keeps getting more and more important every day. It's never too late to admit you're somebody who always runs behind schedule. I want there to be a flow in my book. I don't want them all to hit or land in the same way. First, I want to loosen you up with a pun, then distract you with a derelict joke, then hit you hard with an oxymoron about existence itself. Like one critic wrote of my work, the material takes you from the comforts of cliché to the chasms of contradiction with just a few strokes of the pen. I'm like a boxer. Little right jab, little left jab, another little right jab, stiff uppercut. I used to think I was making something out of life. Then I thought life was making something out of me. Now I'm hoping for either. Identity crisis is another one of the themes in my book, both personal and collective. What was that one? Did I read it already? I'm clearly headed straight towards having no direction in life. Some of these are for sale here, by the way, and I don't know if that one is, but I know it's, we created these wonderful little plaques that you can look at after the show with some of my favorite quotes, and they're framed, and then there are books for sale downstairs as well. But direction is hard to find in life. Identity is very slippery. When I was a teenager, my mother made the dangerous mistake of sharing with me a great quote from Mark Twain. Never let school interfere with your education. It was off. That was the end. And so I took a rather audacious backpacking trip around the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be when I left, but my parents had had enough of "Come on, baby, light my fire," followed by firecrackers out the window. I had had enough of high school and being taught to draw inside the lines, and so it was time to fly. Now, there's a few stories I could tell from that time, but one story stands out in particular as a pivotal point in my own identity formation, and it was a debate. It was a debate among Jews. I'd hitchhiked my way from Greece through Turkey, Syria, Jordan, and into Israel, and was hanging out in Jerusalem. I was reading the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test and the biography of Jim Morrison. Some rabbis found me by the Wailing Wall and brought me to their place of study, a yeshiva in the Jewish quarter of the old city. They said I could come have lunch. And it wasn't Bob Marley and the Wailers. Well, I found their school to be fascinating, and I ended up staying for a while. I liked learning about my roots, and it was a free place to stay. Well, one day there was a war going on with the PLO. And stay cool, everybody, stay cool. And there was a day when it was announced that they thought the Israeli army had injured or possibly killed the head of the PLO, Yasser Arafat. Okay, so the other yeshiva boys, they were all about 20, 25 years old, mostly Canadian and American. They were happy about the news. They wanted to celebrate. Now, I was young and idealistic and still finding my voice, and I said, I didn't think that was right. I don't think we should be celebrating when any of God's creatures get destroyed. Now, I'd been in the Middle East all of 2 months or so I wasn't really an expert on the matter, and I came from the suburbs of Chicago. But I held my moral high ground. Yeah, moral high ground, yeah, and you know the operative word in that phrase. Well, they held their ground too. They pulled out the Talmud and said, scrolling through the pages, it said it was okay, look right here, it's okay to celebrate when your enemies are vanquished. Look right here, it says, the children of Israel sang songs in the Sinai desert looking back at the Red Sea, which had parted before them to help them escape, and then crashed down on the Pharaoh's armies as they pursued them from behind. They said, it's written that one of the archangels in heaven also celebrated, and he, she, it was chastised by God. For it's okay for people to celebrate when their enemies are vanquished, but not an angel. I felt unconvinced. I was kind of on the outs with the school anyway for bringing female guests back to the dorm. I only got busted once, but she wasn't even Jewish. She was from Norway. So things were getting a little sketchy for me there. And then, I went to a Chinese restaurant in the Arab quarter of the old city of Jerusalem with the aforementioned Norwegian and got a fortune cookie at the end. In Chinese restaurants, they give you fortune cookies. In Jewish restaurants, they give you misfortune cookies. Anyway, this was a fortune cookie because it shaped my future a little bit. It said, do you want to know what the fortune cookie said? Yeah. I remember. Thank you. It said, conduct your victory like a funeral. And I was floored. It was written by someone I'd never heard of. Lao Tzu? Who was that? What wisdom tradition was that part of? Anyway, I stole away in the night, headed for the Negev desert where I worked on a farm for a while. Since that time, by the way, my mother was never worried about me getting trapped in a cult. And I've never forgotten that fortune cookie. About a month later in the Negev desert, on some beater guitar, I wrote my first song, Sitting on a Little Hill. I don't think I'm going to sing it, though. But I haven't turned my back against Judaism. And if you want to hear more about that, come to my show once it's written and on stage called Follow Your Briss. I eventually drifted back to the U.S. where I continued my education and ended up getting an entire degree in Asian philosophy and Chinese language. Right? Yeah, I've talked about this with some of you. It took me 4 years, but I did finally learn how to say, "Where's the bathroom?" in Mandarin. And now I know a thing or two about the Taoist tradition. And I play with that material in some of my jokes in my book. I'll read a few passages from chapter 13. Ambivalence is the only way forward. I'm under a lot of pressure to lower my stress levels this week. One must always do one's absolute best not to try too hard in life. I'm looking for a new life coach. No experience necessary. Your personal inadequacies excite me a whole lot more than mine do. That's for all you people in relationships. Have fun. I've seen the future of Cartesian dualism, and I can tell you this, it's not all good. I hate drama so much that I immediately point my finger at those who create it. There are more neural connections in my 4-pound brain than there are stars in 1,000 galaxies. But I still bet on the Cubs. And they came through, yeah. Finally, yeah, that was after a lot of losses. I'm not nearly as nostalgic as I used to be a long, long time ago. I'm finally getting more aggressive about my meditation practice. Does it show? I'm both manic and depressive, but I've struck a very healthy balance between the two. Can't believe I'm only 39 years old and I already lie about my age. It's a real sign of intelligence to grasp multiple sides of a complex issue, try to reconcile them in your mind, and then feel hopeless and start to panic. If you're not completely baffled by how we got here, you don't understand a lick of world history. I just want to do a few more from this chapter before I go to the last chapter in the book. I only care about 3 things: money, power, and the salvation of all living beings. The pretenses you've absorbed to thrive in your part of society bother me a lot more than mine. It's a tough one, but that's some stuff we got to be looking at, you know? Taking my unsolicited advice is something I would not recommend, even if no one asked me. I found sobriety so addictive, I abstained from it for a month. When it comes to drinking and smoking, I'm taking a little break from doing without. That one didn't make it in the book, but I love it. It's more of a bar joke. You'll stop believing satisfaction is always around the next corner in just a little while from now. The universe expanded 115 trillion miles in the time it took me to decide which shoes to wear today. It's a shoe people joke. I knew it was my fault that the inevitable happened. Well, so I think listening to these koans is a little bit like a group meditation. We're playing with language and playing with the group mind. The one take-home about meditation that I'd like you to leave with is, be careful who you meditate with. When you meditate with someone, you're not only meditating with them, you're meditating with everyone they've ever meditated with. You know, I wrote this book, Letting Go is All We Have to Hold On, because I have to know where we're going next. With our brains, with our knowledge, with our nervous systems. I have to know, I have to be part of it. And I have to engage you and others in this collective inquiry. Where shall we go next with language, friends? How shall we next evolve together? One of my favorite jokes in the book relates to this. Well, actually, there's 2 of them. The first one is personal. My big plan for the future is to let go of the past. It's pretty ambitious if you think about it. I probably should lower my expectations on myself. I also wrote, We owe it to future generations to cut all ties with the past. What can I say? I'm mostly a forward-looking guy. I think mankind's best years and best ideas are in front of us. Like I say in the book, it's going to be a long week at work. They put me on the paradigm shift. I'd like to end just by reading a few, I don't know which ones, selections from chapter 16. The beginning is near. I quote George Orwell, "People can only be happy when they do not assume that the object of life is happiness." I quote Jack Benny, "I don't deserve this award, but I have arthritis and I don't deserve that either." And then I quote myself, "I really should have stopped regretting the past a long time ago." So I feel like in this last chapter, I'm trying to kind of recapitulate like the major themes and send people on their way. And so I'll just pick a few of these. Happiness is not a destination, but you probably haven't arrived at that conclusion yet. Suffering is such an intrinsic part of the human experience. Seems we should all try to enjoy it more. I always figured a little false humility is better than no humility at all. Transcending the illusion of ego is easy. What's hard is not bragging about it. I'm desperately driven by my need not to be controlled by any pathology. That's one of my favorites. That'll be the one on my wall. And the other one on my wall will be, I'm totally irreverent, but only out of a sense of respect for everything that's sacred. The universe keeps telling me that I'm not hearing voices on a vast enough scale. I'm like, what? If you just admit that I'm right, I would immediately open up to your point of view. I'm just going to do a couple more. I'm a lifelong learner. I make new mistakes all the time. It takes an entire village to raise a child, but only one dipstick to know the oil is low. Oh, well, when I have to wrap up, consciousness is the greatest mystery of science, but most people are completely in the dark about this. Oh, this life really came and went in a flash, but that soup we ordered is taking forever. I think that should be this whole life came and went in a flash, but that soup we ordered, taken forever. It's not going to be hot, I know, I can feel it. If God is watching me, he obviously hasn't heard of Netflix. You know, with that joke, it used to be, if God is watching me, he obviously hasn't heard of Game of Thrones. But then because I do learn from all people, especially those who agree with me, with humor, it's harder to separate yourself from the material than it is with other forms of writing. I have a book of poems. I'm going to read a poem for you before you leave tonight. But I think with songs and with poetry, it's not that hard to separate yourself and be objective about what you're producing and say, other people are going to like that. With humor, it's very hard to know if I think this is funny because of some idiosyncrasy that I have that won't be shared by many other people. So I have vetted this, and a lot of you are still my friends after some long years of helping me vet this material. And I use the word idiosyncrasy as in a joke. I want to remember it. We all have to learn how to stop taking things so personally in our own idiosyncratic way. We're already omniscient, we just don't know it yet. Parmenides taught that reality is totally immutable in 400 BC, and nothing's been the same since. We all have to bend the facts a little in life to compensate for how we distort reality. Well, I think that I'll end with these next 3. It doesn't matter where you've lived in the world. These next 8. No, I'm just kidding. I can't stop. I'm desperately driven not to be controlled by any pathology. It doesn't matter where you've lived in the world. What matters is what's still alive in you. I'm using my remaining adult years to cultivate a childlike wonder at the universe. I'll become the ideal person I'm ultimately meant to be as soon as I'm good and done being who I am. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to my jokes. Thank you for coming out tonight. It never goes over this well in the strip club. I have this other book, and the last time I did this show somewhere, the very end, I read a poem real quickly, and several people said that was their favorite part of the show. I thought, really? What about all that? Okay, but so anyway, if you don't mind, I have another book that I co-produced with my friend Michael Hamers, who's here, who also has a beautiful book about Rumi, and some of his cards are out there. And before you get up, I just want to say that this is Jonathan Mason's beautiful artwork. It's all of these iconic places in Boulder. Jonathan is right here, standing in front of Fisk Planetarium. And let's see, which poem shall I do? Guess I'll do a short one. I told you the group minds turns against me. ¿Por qué hablar del amor sin la cura? Tal cosa no existe. Sería como hablar del océano sin sal o lluvia sin sonido. Why speak of love without madness? There's no such thing. It would be like speaking of oceans without salt, or rain without sound. What is madness but reverence for the fragile beauty of this world? And what is poetry but a window into the soul of madness? Close your eyes and follow the sound of trickling water down to the rice fields. I will meet you there before the sun pierces the seeded horizon, before its yellow fingers part the skirt of darkness, before the day breaks into a million shards of light. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Megan. Thank you for having me. Let's all mingle and hang out.
Gregg Eisenberg. Stand-up Buddhist, right? Hold on before you walk out. I'm Lori Preston, Executive Director of the museum, and we're so glad you're here. I love seeing the hands go up that said this was your first time here at the museum. Please come back. We offer things like this all the time. There are some Boulder conversations that are coming up, also free of cost, so please take a look. If you're interested in supporting us, know that there are opportunities to do that. There's even a donation box downstairs, but even more so, we want you to be a member and a part of this museum. We're trying to make museum life look a whole lot different. One of the things that we have in celebration for our 75th anniversary that's happening next weekend is a big party. And I'm trying, I don't know if you're like me, but I was trying to what, can I remember that one that he said? Can I remember that one? So I wrote them down. You buy the book, right? So, of course, our stand-up Buddhist, The Secret Sauce, I know you talked about that. Those books are going to be in the back. And I liked this one. He said, I started to party on Wednesday just in time to take some pleasure. No, is that right? Take pressure off of the weekend. So here we go with this weekend opportunity. Someone under a seat has a ticket that has a value of $75 because it's a ticket to our gala. And we want you to have that. If you have it under your seat, please join us. Bring someone else. If you can't come, hand that ticket to someone else. But we're so glad you're at the museum. Come back.